When you shout the word God or Jesus, you're not taking the Lord's name in vain. In fact, the place you see that the most in modern day is in politics. Hi, I'm Jeremy. I'm a deep skeptic, also a pastor. All right, so if you're like me and you grew up in a more evangelical or fundamentalist stream of Christianity, you were likely told that if you hit your thumb with a hammer and you screamed out God or Jesus, that was taking the Lord's name in vain. And that was important because taking the Lord's name in vain, not taking the Lord's name in vain, is one of the 10 commandments. And so you're like violating one of the 10 commandments. You know, other of those 10 commandments are like, do not steal, do not murder, those kinds of things. Which always felt kind of weird to me because it felt like stealing and murdering were nowhere close to like accidentally screaming the name Jesus or God or whatever when you got hurt. And turns out that's not what that means. So in the ancient world, saying the name of a deity was like invoking the presence of a deity, or saying like the deity had told you something specifically. It was sort of ascribing to a god something that was happening or was about to happen. And so when you used God's name to say that something was going to happen or just happened and that the God caused that, you needed to make really sure that it was actually God. And taking the Lord's name in vain was to like do something that you thought was important or good or whatever, and then just sort of use God to prop it up. I don't know if you've ever heard that. Like, I don't know if you've heard that in the last 10 minutes or seen a news story about that in the last 10 minutes, but that doesn't happen after you hit your finger with a hammer. That's not what taking the Lord's name in vain is. What taking the Lord's name in vain is ascribing things to God that are something that God would not want or do, or using God to justify something that God would be against or not do. Like, I don't know, maybe using God to justify hating people because of their sexuality or excluding them because of their sexuality, or I don't know, using God to justify taking away the bodily autonomy of women. I mean, it could be anything, right? Really, anything. But it has to be something that is not what God would do. And so when you look at the Bible, if you look at the Bible, because that's where the 10 Commandments is, right? And you look at the sort of attributes of God that you see proclaimed throughout that story, it is a God who is concerned with justice and grace and love, a God that moves from including two people to a family to a nation to the whole world in God's bigger family. So excluding people, being unloving, ungracious, and then, this is important, using God to prop that up, being unloving, unjust, and saying that like that's what God would want. That's really the truth of God's word, or whatever, however you want to say it. That's taking the Lord's name in vain. So, for what it's worth, I hope it helped.